Thank you again for joining our custom application development webinar today. First things first, if on your webinar bar on the right-hand side of your screen, you can raise your hand to let me know you can hear me, and then we can go ahead and move forward. So if you want to just go ahead and hit the raise hand button on your webinar bar on the right-hand side. Okay, great. Looks like a couple of people have raised their hands, so that means that you can hear me. So we'll go ahead and get started here with this webinar today. Feel free to go ahead and submit questions during the presentation today on the webinar bar on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'm going to address them at the end of the hour. If there's anything pressing, I'll try to look at the end of every slide and see if anybody submitted questions that are relevant to that slide and try to go through them there. But otherwise, we'll cover them at the end of the hour. Before we start, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Fruition Partners and myself. I'm Shane Brazil, and I'm a senior technical consultant with Fruition Partners, specializing in ServiceNow development and customization. Fruition Partners is an IT service management consulting and education company with clients across the U.S. and a few international as well. We've been around since about 2003, and as ITIL and ITSM practices have grown, so have we. Expanding into many different sectors, including education, law, healthcare, and manufacturing. Basically, anyone that needs help with ServiceNow development, ITIL, or ITSM. All of our employees have a ITIL D3 Foundations certification or higher, and all our technical consultants are experts in their field. We are focused on complete IT service management integration from education, where we can help you establish a broader ITSM initiative, to administration, where we can build out ServiceNow applications, supplement your existing staff, upgrade you to the latest release, and even take complete management of your instance if you'd like. We also have the ability, as we will see today, to build custom apps and tools on top of your existing ServiceNow platform. Basically, we like to think of ourselves as a ITSM one-stop shop, combining education, consultation, and ServiceNow professional services. Now, to begin the actual custom application development, a quick overview of what we'll go over today. We'll talk about creating new tables, applications, modules, the different way we can actually generate records in our new application, security around that application, some of the out-of-the-box features that are on the platform, like workflow notifications, reporting that we can use, making our new application flexible by creating a custom properties page, and then we'll hop into questions at the very end. A quick note, this will be recorded and posted on our website for viewing later on, so we will have this recorded and viewable later on after this presentation is over with in probably about a week. First part here I want to cover is creating a new table, applications and modules in ServiceNow. The first question you need to really ask yourself is there functionality that you need that's already built out in the tool? For example, if you're building a task-like application, you'll probably want to extend the task table to be able to pull back some of the features like the activity formatter, the use of metrics and SLAs. So you'd probably want to extend the task table. So that's a big question you need to keep in mind when you're actually building out these custom applications, as well as when you're building it for the left-hand navigation menu. Does it need a whole new application, or is this just a module in an existing application that's already out there? Today we're actually going to talk about an application that I built in the past So I built this yesterday pretty quickly, but we built out an application before for accounts receivable. So what I did was, the first part, right, is coming in here and creating that new table. And so typing in accounts receivable here. And then down here, I actually named the table U_AR. And since I want to use a lot of the task-based functionality, I actually then extend the task table. And I created a new application called accounts receivable. And I want a new module in the application I'm creating. So it's pretty basic, right, to start. To create a table on ServiceNow and extend your ServiceNow platform. So nothing really complex here. We're just creating a table called U_AR. It'll hold our accounts receivable tickets. We're going to extend the task table, which means we get some of the functionality that comes out of the box with tasks. And we're just creating an application. And once I hit do it, what you'll see is it'll actually create this application on your left-hand side. And once you do it, there's only going to be one module here that'll say accounts receivable. And obviously, I've created a few other modules. So for this particular application, we just needed a few, such as assign to me a couple that break down the list of tickets by the different states that these accounts receivable tickets can be in. So pending, open, or close. As well as I added a home page module. So it's actually a module that just points to a home page of reports that are related to our accounts receivable, and then the properties page. And we'll go into both those in further detail down the road. But looking at the ticket, we'll see that a lot of these are, it looks just like a task record, right? So we're using a lot of the fields that come out of the box, like assign to, assignment group, number. The only difference here is I actually created a number maintenance record so that we can have our number convention a little bit different. So if we look for our table here, U_AR, there it is. Created a new number maintenance record. So all our tickets that are on the UAR table will start with a prefix of AR, not task. Since we extended that task table, we wanted to look a little bit differently. So that's a quick general gist of creating a new table. And then from here, obviously, we have the option of adding custom fields just to the accounts receivable table, as well as changing that form layout and list layout. So that's the only customizations that have been done at this point. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. The next thing you need to keep in mind is how you're going to actually generate records for this application. Will it be like incident where there's a create new module? Will users actually be coming into ServiceNow and submitting tickets, or you can see there's two other options as well of kind of automating this. So maybe for this example, for accounts receivable, we're actually doing an inbound email action. And so can a user send in an email that has the details necessary to generate a ticket on this table? Or as a system, you could actually build out an integration as well where a system sends an email into the system and generates tickets in ServiceNow. So inbound actions can be either used from users submitting emails and sending those off to ServiceNow, or even with integrations. Or if you're getting a little bit more complex, we could also do web services. So if you're just wanting to use the out-of-the-box whistle and generate tickets on that table, pretty easy to do. Or if you're doing something more complex where you need to build in relationships and actually run a few scripts when you're inserting tickets into ServiceNow, there's the scripted web services module that will be automatically installed on all instances of the June 2011 Preview 3 release, and that gives you a little bit more power to insert tickets as well as run a few scripts after you're maybe adding a CI and creating a relationship with that CI and another CI, things like that. I've used it a few times and it's really handy. So quite a few options here on generating records. So let's take a look at how we did it with this accounts receivable application. So like I said, we're using an inbound action to actually generate these AR tickets. So it looks pretty similar to incident, not very difficult here. One thing you'll notice is in the condition line that I actually have a condition where it's pulling a property. We'll see here, we'll look at it in a second, ar.email.address. And what that address is we're trying to say these emails are getting sent to some box. So in this example, it's ar@company.com. So users are sending, AR questions, accounts receivable questions to some mailbox. So in this example, like I said, ar@company.com. When that happens, they're automatically being forwarded to ServiceNow. So what we're checking here is we're saying if that email was originally sent to ar@company.com, meaning it was an accounts receivable request or ticket, then generate a record on the accounts receivable page. So like I said, this is pretty much all incident. Inbound email action altered a little bit. The only other noticeable feature here is that for the state, I'm actually creating a property that we're setting our state originally to when a ticket opens, which when we get to the properties page, we can talk about making it a little bit easier for people to alter things and they don't actually have to get in this code. So this allows somebody to change the state from pending or to open, so we can actually say when all tickets come in, they're either in a pending state or they're in an open state, or really any state for that matter, by just setting a property, making it easier for admins down the road not have to actually dig in your code to set things up. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll get into that a little more detail here later on, but for this example, we just use an inbound action to generate those tickets for our accounts receivable ticket. And you'll actually notice that there is no create new module, as well as I actually locked down the list control, so there is no button on the list. So I actually have the omit new button selected, so you can't create AR tickets from the list view either. The next part we want to talk about is security. So when you're implementing these new applications, especially as you get into things like human resources and accounts receivable, where data can be kind of essentially secretive, and you don't want a lot of people getting in your records, the first thing you need to think about is locking down the applications and the modules by roles, right? So not everybody that logs into ServiceNow should have access to this accounts receivable application that I created. So there's a couple different parts there. We'll go ahead and jump back over to the instance. The first part where they created a group called accounts receivable. This accounts receivable group has a custom role that I created called AR. So really all this AR role that I created this for is to actually allow users to get to the accounts receivable application. So like we talked about, if we look at the accounts receivable application now, we'll see that it's locked down to only users that have the AR role. So we're actually blocking access from the application by locking it down to the AR role. Now, essentially, another thing to keep in mind is if you know what you're doing in the system, obviously, you can probably just type in the table name and a .list to pull up the list. So even if you don't have access to the application on the left-hand side, if you're a technical person and you know that little trick about ServiceNow, any user can still essentially get to any record on the table or on the accounts receivable table by just typing the .list feature in the type filter text. So the next thing we need to talk about is security and access control rules. So there's 3 different ways you can lock down access with those access control rules, either by roles, conditional expressions, scripts, or all 3. And on the right side, there's a little screenshot there from the wiki on access control rules that kind of talks about the pattern on what they're executed, and then the order they're executed. So essentially what we had to do here is we had to lock down all accounts receivable records from people that don't have that AR role. So if we go back to our instance and we actually look at access control under system security, we'll find the table that the access control role that I built yesterday. It's a very basic one. It's a read operation on the accounts receivable table for records. Admin's going to override it. It's active. There's no condition here. There's no script. We're going to lock it down for everybody except for anybody that has the AR role. So this is allowing anybody with the AR role to actually get access to those tickets. So a good example here is if we actually impersonate somebody that does not have the AR role and what they see. So like I was saying, you can actually, pull up any table by just typing in the .list. So I can pull up incidents. They have a before query business rule here that prevents all the incidents coming back, but you can still see some of them. For this case, we don't want them to see anything on the system unless they have the AR role. So now if they hit the UAR list, we can see that security is actually hiding those tickets by creating that access control rule. So security is a big thing you want to keep in mind. Who should be able to get those tickets? Is that information secured? And in this case, it took just a basic access control rule that prevents anybody from seeing those tickets without having the AR role. The next thing you can keep in mind is that obviously you're working on top of the ServiceNow platform, which is a pretty powerful tool, and it already offers a lot of useful tools for applications that already exist or applications you're building on top of your ServiceNow platform when you're extending your instance. And three big ones are workflow, notifications, and reporting. So using the workflow, you can automate processes, right? So every time an accounts receivable ticket comes in, we can assign it to a group that then routes it to a person that sends a notification out, maybe on some condition, and there's approvals required, and the process gets pretty thorough. And ServiceNow makes it easy by having that graphical workflow engine. We can kind of automate that process for a custom application really easily. The ServiceNow platform also can notify users, so you have the ability to create notifications on certain events. So maybe when a user sends an accounts receivable email into that ar@company.com email box, we can literally send them an email back saying, hey, thank you for submitting your AR request. We'll get back to you as soon as possible, so that user actually has feedback that their ticket's been worked on, and they have an idea that they did submit it successfully. They're not going to keep on resending it. It kind of helps with ticket submission. So it's really easy to do, obviously, to create notifications. So you still have that ability just building on top of the ServiceNow platforms. So that's nothing custom that you have to do after you build it. Besides just building out your own notifications and events. And the last part is really the reporting capability of ServiceNow to gather that information and then present it in a way that makes sense, and you can pull back metrics and really understand what's going on. So I created a few reports, and I threw them on our accounts receivable homepage. You can see here just a few, right? Accounts receivable tickets are opened by priority this week, by state, and then by what company opened them. So this is really easy to do, obviously, by just creating a new report and putting it on our accounts receivable department, adding the correct filters, grouping by the right field, and really the sky's the limit here. So we're pulling back some basic metrics on our accounts receivable application by using a few reports on this homepage. And that's all obviously native to ServiceNow. So we're just extending that capability and using it for our brand new application. Pretty powerful. The next thing I want to talk about is making sure you keep in mind the flexibility idea. So down the road, if you're the one implementing this, or you know, if you just want to make it easier on yourself without having to change scripts all the time, creating a custom properties page is probably one of the best things you can do. And it's really easy to do, and we'll actually walk through here in a second. But the screenshot below shows one for an integration I built out between a remote desktop support tool called BombGuard and ServiceNow. And the idea was that you can see here that we pull back the instance name there, so you're not having to hard code that anywhere in the system. So if it changes, you don't have to find every place in the code it's hard coded in. We're actually just changing it right here. So the idea is, number one, reducing redundancy. So if you do have some value that could change in the future, we create a property for it, and we have one place where it's stored. And then the second part is that it might change down the road. So at one point, you can see here that the first option here is if it wants to go to the general queue versus a specific resolver. So we have the option here to just check a box that will switch the code for us without us having to actually go in there and change an if statement. So let's go ahead and take a look at the properties page that I created here for accounts receivable. So the only two properties I have here that we looked at in the inbound action are what email address are OAR tickets being sent to before they're sent to ServiceNow. So that's where inbound action is actually checking. So we say, you know, all my tickets for my company are actually being sent to ar@company.com. A good example of where this comes really useful is when maybe your email domain name is going to change. I've had that before. I've actually had to write a script to check a whole instance of an example of where that domain existed and then find every single instance and change it to their new domain. Here it would just be as simple as changing this property, and that's going to update everything in accounts receivable for us that we need. And the second part there is the idea of being flexible, right? So right now we're set to where every ticket that comes into the accounts receivable application actually comes in as pending instead of open, or we could switch it to open, or really any number for that matter, and then we'll open those tickets at that value. Let's go ahead and take a look at the module itself. You can see here that it's a URL from arguments link type, and the arguments here are sysproperties UI.do with the category equal to AR. So that's the only part you have to change, is the category part, and that's going to pull back all properties that are associated with that category. So when we take a look at the system property list, we'll notice that you can see my two AR properties here. And down below, I created a new category of AR. So that's where that module is actually pulling back all properties associated with this category. So it's really easy. Give it a name, description, we have a few different types for that property, and then obviously our value and associated with that category. And then from here, it's obviously we'll take a look back at that inbound action. What we can see is it's pretty easy to pull back. It's just gs.get property and then the name of your property. That pulls back that value. So that's not at all very complex. Pretty easy to do, and like I said, it makes a big difference going down the line. Instead of having to hard code things in like ar@company.com, now we can actually just pull it back here and look it up instead of actually having to hard code that in here. So little things like that are things you want to keep in mind when you're building these custom applications. What's going to be easier to maintain down the road, and allowing it to be flexible as you build out on it. And then obviously that's just the start of what you can do with these custom applications. You know, there's map pages, timelines, so much more you can really build out on these. So this is just the basic custom application development ideas you want to keep in mind when you start working on doing it, either at an accounts receivable department, using something that's out of the box like facilities or HR, which is really something similar to this, only it comes in a plugin, or anything else down the road. So Using CMS as well is a big thing you could always do to spiff up your application if you wanted a pretty front end. Anything that the ServiceNow platform leverages, you can leverage here with your custom application. So the sky's really the limit, and that's something you want to keep in mind when you're building these applications out. So that's the main part of what I wanted to talk about today. So we've come to the questions part. So if you guys have any questions, you can submit them on the webinar right now, or we're always around. So we have a Twitter account, a Facebook page, and a LinkedIn page, as well as a website, solutionpartners.com. So you can constantly send us questions through any one of those. We're always around, and like I said, this webinar will be posted on our website, solutionpartners.com, later on. So if you want to watch it again or have somebody else watch it, it will be available. So it doesn't look like anybody has any questions right now. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, I guess. Thank you for attending. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk about this in more detail, but keep in mind that building custom applications is really not difficult at all on the ServiceNow platform, and just make sure you have the right architecture in mind when you're building it out, and that will make things so much better.